Addiction is generally understood through experts, doctors, policymakers and the media. But that's not who lives it. The people with the most direct experience are usually the ones least heard, while those furthest from it define what it means. So the story of addiction gets shaped from the outside in. And if the narrative itself is controlled, can anything be built on it actually be true? Drugs and Addiction, an Anarchist Perspective, Dickie Dredd. And this is part 62 in the video series, still in chapter 8, Propaganda, Fear and the Myth of the Addict. Okay, section 60. Fucking hell, I keep getting the section bit buggered up. It's section 63, not 62. Section 62, counter narratives, telling the truth. Let's just make sure I'm getting that right. Sorry, I'm fucked up here. Right, counter narratives, truth telling and the collective voice. If section 61 exposed the economics of fear, this section turns to those who refuse to sell it. Every hierarchy depends on control of narrative. Every liberation begins with reclaiming it. For decades, the drug debate has been conducted in the language of crime and cure, spoken by those with least experience of either. Counter-narrative work, independent journalism, peer media, and mutual aid publishing challenge into that monopoly by making lived experience the evidence. Anarchist media traditions treat truth as collective property. From early zines and pirate radio to digital platforms and podcasts, their purpose has been simply to inform, but not simply to inform, but to connect. The same principle that underpins open source science, we talked about that earlier, applies here. Transparency as resistance. When users, carers and communities tell their own stories, the hierarchy of expertise collapses. The act of publication itself becomes mutual aid, a gift of visibility. Festival welfare networks embody this ethic. As described earlier, harm reduction crews and psychedelic support collectives have evolved into media producers in their own right. They document lived history through podcasts, short films and workshops, transforming welfare into education. Each interview, field recording or story, shared in a tent or community hall, is an archive of survival. These voices counter the dominant imagery of deviance and decline by presenting care, cooperation and creativity as central to culture. Recent documentaries continue that tradition. Paolo Cedasari's The Killing of Wally Hope revisits the foundational trauma of modern festival culture, the death that symbolised the state's fear of autonomous gathering. By reopening the case, Cedasari not only honours one individual but also exposes how narrative itself was weaponised, how madness and drug use became shorthand for dissent. Likewise, the film Free Party, A Folk History, reframes the 1990s rave scene not as chaos but as community, a folk revival set in electronic rhythm. Both films perform the same act of reclamation, turning the archive of shame into a collective testimony of resistance. Newer media forms extend that lineage. Harm reduction podcasts such as Drug Science and Reset provide open discussion without sensationalism, combining personal stories with research from figures such as David Marte. Online platforms host first-person accounts of recovery and relapse without moral framing. These spaces operate as informal truth commissions where language shifts from pathology to participation. Each confession becomes not a plea for forgiveness but a claim to reality. A politics of voice run deeper than style. As Hall argued, ideology works by framing perception, deciding who is visible and who is blamed. Counter-media, therefore, functions as re-education, dismantles the conditioning described earlier by reintroducing nuance where propaganda offered simplicity. A person who tells their story on camera, in a zine, or through a song performs an act of epistemic disobedience, asserting that knowledge can arise from pain as well as policy. Anarchist communication rejects both censorship and spectacle. Its aim is not to replace one orthodoxy with another, but to multiply perspectives until no single authority can dominate. open platforms, Creative Commons publishing, and peer-distributed film release reflect this ethic materially. Each screening, zine fair or festival Q&A becomes a miniature commons of speech, a rehearsal for the democracy Prohibition fears. In this sense, media work becomes therapy by other means. Storytelling restores continuity to lives fragmented by stigma. It translates isolation into solidarity, converts shame into shared vocabulary. Where Section 49 described the disease model appropriate of confession, this section reclaims confession as agency. To speak publicly about use, harm or recovery without apology is to withdraw consent from control. These counter-narratives now circulate faster than censorship can contain them. Grassroots journalism and film cooperatives document policy failures more effectively than official reviews. Social media, despite its distortions, allows the marginalised to bypass editorial gatekeeping. Yet the most radical truth-telling still happens face-to-face, in community meetings, harm reduction tents, and quiet conversations that refuse despair. What emerges is an anarchist media ecology, decentralised, independent and regenerative. It challenges the economics of stigma by making attention a commons rather than a commodity. Every shared story widens the circle of witness and weakens the power of silence. In the end, counter-narrative is not simply about representation, it is about reparation, healing through truth. Story of addiction has never been neutral. It's been shaped by those with the power to define it and protected by excluding the people who live it, which means what we call understanding addiction may actually be a controlled narrative, not a shared truth. So the voices we trust are the least experienced. Whose reality have we been listening to? And if that changes, what else in the system starts to fall apart? So up next in still chapter, as the last part of chapter 8, Propaganda, Fear and the Myth of the Addict, is section 64, Toward Linguistic Liberation.